Have you ever heard about a waitress who agreed to marry a homeless man just to fulfill her grandmother's final wish? And then, that very man turned out to be hiding a secret identity she never could have imagined. A secret millionaire, running away from his own glamorous world. This isn't just a story about appearances, it's a journey of finding trust, love, and acceptance, even when everything on the surface seems to deceive us. Before we dive into the story, we'd love to know a little bit about you. Which city or country are you listening from? Do you have an unforgettable love story of your own? Would you be willing to share it with us? Don't hesitate, leave a comment below and tell us your story. Now let's listen and find out what really happened between the waitress and the mysterious man. Night rain in a small town always carries a special kind of loneliness. Raindrops tapped softly against the awning of the empty cafe where Emily was wiping down the last table before closing up. Her uniform was worn out, her shoes frayed at the edges, and her hair was hastily tied back at the nape of her neck. All of it made her look both tired and gentle. Outside the glass window, the street lamp's pale yellow light spilled onto the wet pavement. A figure stood there, thin, wrapped in a faded hoodie, arms hugging himself against the cold. Emily glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. She should head home. Her grandmother was waiting, in their tiny apartment in an old, crumbling housing block. But the figure outside just stood there, like a silent question hanging in the air. After a moment of hesitation, she took off her apron and stepped outside. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice cautious but kind. The man lifted his head. His face was hidden in the shadow of his hood. His voice was low and hoarse, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. "I'm just looking for a place to stay out of the rain." Emily looked around. On a rainy night like this, there was nowhere else open. It wasn't her business, she told herself. But then an image flashed in her mind, her grandmother lying in their cold little room, illness clinging to every breath. Her grandmother had taught her, sometimes giving someone else a chance is giving yourself a light to follow. Emily sighed, zipped her jacket up higher, and said quickly, "There's an awning over there. It'll keep you dry, but you should find somewhere safer soon." The man nodded as if grateful and quietly made his way toward the spot she pointed at. Before she turned back into the cafe, Emily caught a glimpse of something in his walk. A kind of resilience that didn't feel like despair and wasn't the defeated shuffle of someone who had given up. Back at the tiny apartment, Emily quietly pushed the door open. Her grandmother was fast asleep on the sofa, the blanket slipping onto the floor. Emily bent down and gently pulled the blanket back over her. In her sleep, her grandmother's frail hand reached out and grasped Emily's. "You silly girl, don't spend your whole life alone." The dreamy words made Emily's heart ache. She had never really thought about love or marriage. Life was already hard enough, juggling 3 jobs, paying rent, covering her grandmother's medical bills. Love felt as distant and unattainable as a vacation in Hawaii. Emily stood up and went into the kitchen to boil a pot of tea. The kitchen light cast a soft glow on her face, a strangely beautiful face, not in a delicate way, but in a way that spoke of endurance, of someone who had learned how to smile after the worst days. Outside, the rain kept falling steadily. In her mind, the image of the homeless man standing under the awning flickered back. A strange feeling crept into her chest, not pity, but a sense of recognizing another lost soul in this city, much like herself. She brewed an extra cup of hot tea and tucked it carefully into a small paper bag. Before she could think too much about it, she threw on another jacket and stepped back out into the night. The cold wind slapped her face, making her eyes sting. When she got there, the man was still sitting under the awning, knees drawn up to his chest, head bowed. "Here, drink this to warm up," Emily said, holding out the cup of tea, her voice steadier than before. The man looked up. This time, the light from the street lamp was enough for Emily to see his eyes, deep, calm, and sad. He took the cup with both hands and whispered, "Thank you." For some reason, in that moment, Emily felt everything around her soften, as if in the middle of this cold, rainy night, she had found someone else struggling with the world in their own way. She didn't know then that this small encounter would be the beginning of a story she could never have imagined. Emily woke up to the soft clinking sounds coming from the kitchen. She rubbed her eyes and saw the familiar figure of her grandmother, fussing with the tea kettle. The weak morning light filtered through the old window, casting a hazy golden glow over the worn-out furniture in the apartment. "You're up," her grandmother said, smiling, a smile blurred gently by the deep wrinkles carved by time. Emily stepped over and took the kettle from her hands. "You should let me do that. You need to rest." Her grandmother smiled, her eyes kind but carrying a hidden sadness. "I'm old now. There aren't many days left for me to see you live happily." The words were as light as a breeze, but they weighed on Emily's chest like a stone. She avoided her grandmother's gaze, pretending to look for something on the kitchen shelf. For years, her life had revolved around work and taking care of her grandmother. The thought of a life of her own, of having someone by her side, had never really had a place. "I'm fine, Grandma. Don't worry," Emily said, her voice soft like a lullaby. But her grandmother just shook her head slowly. "Being fine doesn't mean living alone for the rest of your life, Emily. You need someone who loves you, who cares for you, who will walk through life with you." Emily forced a small smile. For her, love felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Medical bills, rent, utilities, those were her realities. She turned away, hiding the tear that slipped out in a rare moment of weakness. Breakfast passed in an unusual heavy silence. Her grandmother's words felt like a small knife, quietly carving a deep line into Emily's mind. Around noon, while wiping down tables at the cafe, Emily found herself thinking about the man she had met the night before. His eyes, that strange calmness, kept lingering in her head. A crazy idea popped into her mind, making her chuckle out loud. What if she needed a husband just to ease her grandmother's worries? Not love, not commitment, just someone to stand beside her during a few family visits, enough for her grandmother to feel at peace and focus on getting better. Afterward, they could divorce quietly, no fuss. The idea sounded ridiculous, almost laughable, but the more she thought about it, the more strangely reasonable it seemed. She glanced around the cafe, rushed customers, unfamiliar faces, then her eyes settled on an empty corner. A chair where, just last night, he had stood silently under the awning as she locked up. Was he still somewhere nearby? A part of Emily, the impulsive, reckless side she usually kept buried, urged her to go look for him. Sure enough, in an old parking lot a few blocks away, she spotted him. The same man, still wearing the faded clothes, sitting with his knees drawn up beside a dumpster, staring off into the distance. Emily walked toward him, her heart pounding hard against her ribs. "You," she called out, her voice trembling with nerves. "I have a proposition." He looked up, his deep black eyes locking onto hers. Silence, only the soft sound of rain tapping on the nearby tin roof. "It's not pity, and it's not charity," she blurted out, afraid he might misunderstand. "I need a husband, just on paper, for a short time, for my grandmother." He stared at her for so long that Emily thought he was about to turn and walk away. "For your grandmother?" he finally repeated softly. She nodded, feeling like a complete fool. Who proposes marriage to a homeless man they've only met once? "No strings, no love. I'll cover all the costs," she stammered, her cheeks burning red. Unexpectedly, he let out a laugh, a rough, low sound, but without a hint of mockery. For the first time, Emily saw the corners of his mouth lift, and in his eyes there was a flicker of something real. "Sounds like a cheap movie," he muttered, then pushed himself up, standing a full head taller than her. "But I like movies with happy endings." Before Emily could respond, he held out his hand. It was rough and cracked, but steady and firm. "We have a deal, girl," he said, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. And just like that, with a strange handshake between two strangers under a light drizzle, Emily's life veered off into a direction she had never dared to imagine. 1 week later, on a sunny but chilly afternoon, Emily stood inside the city marriage registration office. She wore a simple light blue dress borrowed from her roommate, a pair of worn-down flats, and her hair curled naturally because she couldn't afford a trip to the salon. Next to her, the groom, the homeless man from that night, was now clean-shaven with a neat haircut. He wore an old gray suit she had borrowed from a charity shop, the shoulders a bit too wide, the collar slightly wrinkled. But he still looked tall, calm, and somehow carried a quiet kind of charm. His name was Noah. At least that was the only name he was willing to give. The clerk read through the paperwork in a flat, bored tone. Emily fought the urge to laugh when she realized they were standing in a line of couples, some in dazzling white wedding gowns, others in sleek tuxedos, while she and Noah looked like two people who had wandered into the wrong place. "Sign here," the clerk instructed. Noah took the pen, tilted his head, and whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "Should I sign it with a marker to make it more dramatic?" Emily burst out laughing, almost dropping the paperwork. Noah smiled too, a quick grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes with small, faint lines. No one else in that room knew that behind this lightning-fast wedding was a deal stranger than any rom-com plot. "From this moment, you are officially husband and wife," the clerk announced, voices flat as if he were approving a library card. Emily and Noah looked at each other. No rings, no flowers, no kiss, just a small nod and a handshake, like two business partners sealing a deal. "So, when's the wedding party?" Noah teased. "Right after I win the lottery," Emily shot back without missing a beat, and both of them burst out laughing. Leaving the building, they walked under the cold sunlight of late winter. Noah shoved his hands into his pockets, whistling an old tune as he went. Emily hopped over puddles left on the sidewalk like a little kid. "You have to remember the story," she reminded him seriously. "We met at the library. You helped me find a book, then we fell in love after 3 dates. Love at first sight sounds too fake." Noah raised an eyebrow, looking like a student trying to absorb a tough lesson. "Library. 3 dates. No instant love," he repeated. Emily laughed at how seriously he took it. "You don't have to memorize it like it's a final exam. Just be natural." Noah glanced at her and gave a small smile. "I'm just afraid of messing up your plan, little lady." Those words, spoken so lightly and sincerely, made Emily's heart skip for just a moment. When they got home, her grandmother was already waiting in the living room. The moment she saw Emily holding Noah's hand, her face lit up, radiant. The weariness of the past few months seemed to lift from her features. "My beautiful granddaughter," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "And the groom. Much more handsome than I imagined." Noah smiled genuinely, bowing his head politely as he clasped her frail hand warmly and naturally. That entire evening, under the soft yellow glow of the old lamp, Emily and Noah sat listening to her grandmother tell stories from her youth. Laughter, soft coughing, and whispered memories filled the room. No one mentioned the contract. No one spoke about how it would all end. There was only laughter, and glances that quietly met across the room, as if, in this strange moment, they really were a small family tucked away inside a vast, cold world. On their first morning living together, Emily realized she was about to face a real nightmare. In the tiny apartment that already felt cramped, Noah's presence turned everything into chaos. He had spread his backpack, clothes, and newspapers all over the place like he was claiming territory. "Are you planning to open a clutter exhibit in my house?" Emily crossed her arms, staring at the mess on the sofa in disbelief. Noah shrugged casually. "Call it dynamic art. You haven't seen anything yet. This is just the demo." Emily sighed, picking up a crumpled jacket from the couch. "You do know there's this brilliant invention called a closet, right?" "Sure," Noah nodded earnestly. "But out on the street, we prioritize fast packing over neat organizing." She pointed at the rickety wooden wardrobe in the corner. "You have 5 minutes to adapt to civilization. After that, I'm going in with force." Noah grinned and gave a mock bow. "Yes, Your Majesty." The next problem, and a more serious one, was the food situation. Emily's fridge had always been a sad collection of eggs, milk, and instant noodles. But just 2 days after Noah moved in, it had turned into a bizarre warehouse of sauces, assorted cheeses, and even Polish pickles. One morning, when Emily opened the fridge to grab some milk, she found the ice cream container had been replaced with a giant tub of mayonnaise. She stared at it like she had just discovered an alien life form. Noah yawned as he walked out of the bathroom and said, "Survival tip, always keep something fatty within reach." Emily glared at him. "Are you planning to kill me with cholesterol?" Noah shrugged, his face completely calm. "If you can survive living with me, you'll easily make it to 100. Emily shook her head and shoved the mayonnaise tub far out of sight. That night, the battle for the TV remote broke out. Emily had just finished a long shift, exhausted, dreaming all day about finally watching the Korean drama she had promised herself all week. But when she walked into the living room, Noah was sprawled comfortably on the couch, eyes glued to a sports channel, yelling at the screen like he was at a live game. "My turn to pick the channel," Emily said, her voice unusually calm. Noah didn't even glance away from the screen. "Who made the house rules?" "The landlord," Emily answered crisply. "And the landlord wants to watch people fall in love, not beat each other up." Noah narrowed his eyes, thought for a second, then grabbed the remote and hid it behind his back. "What are you gonna do? Sue me?" Emily stepped closer, smiling sweetly. "No, I'm going to do what girls in Korean dramas do, snatch it and run." She lunged. Noah dodged quickly, but in the end, Emily managed to wrestle the remote away. She held it up in triumph, panting. "You should be grateful I didn't bite you," she said, grinning in victory. Noah shook his head, looking at her with a mix of helplessness and amusement. "You're a real menace in a dress." As night fell, Emily curled up on the sofa, wrapped tightly in a blanket, listening to Noah putter around the kitchen. The sound of running water, dishes clinking. She closed her eyes, letting herself relax, her mind a tangle of emotions. Living with a complete stranger, even just on paper, had never been part of her life plan. But strangely, in the middle of all the clumsiness, the mess, the bickering and laughter, the old worn-out apartment somehow felt a little warmer. She whispered to herself in the dark, "There's no perfect person to love, just someone crazy enough to stick around." And maybe Noah was that particular brand of crazy. But the real clash came on Sunday morning. Emily caught Noah using her favorite mug, the one with the cute cat design, to grow hydroponic green onions. "What is this?" she demanded, pointing at the mug now filled with water and floppy stalks of green onions. Noah turned around, completely unfazed. "Resourcefulness. You should be proud, not mad." Emily gaped at him, grabbing the mug. "You just committed the ultimate sin, disrespecting my cat religion." Noah raised his hands in surrender. All right, I'm sorry. But hey, those green onions could save our dinner one day." Emily snapped, "and destroy my soul in the process." After a tense round of negotiations, they finally agreed to split everything. One cabinet each, one side of the fridge each, and absolutely no touching each other's stuff without permission. Emily posted sticky notes everywhere reading, "Do not trespass." Noah, of course, added little doodles of mischievous smiley faces underneath, with a note that said, "Except in emergencies, like hunger." As night fell, Emily looked around at the apartment covered in sticky notes and laughed until she couldn't breathe. She realized differences didn't always lead to disaster. Sometimes they created strange little stories that only people stubborn and patient enough could keep writing together. Emily wasn't sure exactly when the doubts started creeping in. She just knew that little things weren't adding up. That morning, while tidying up, she happened to catch sight of Noah reading. Not flipping through an old magazine like most homeless people she had met, but actually reading, deeply focused, on a classic novel, The Great Gatsby, an original English edition, thick paper, worn leather cover. He sat by the window, one leg crossed over the other in a way that looked almost scholarly, occasionally underlining sentences with a pencil, his handwriting neat and precise. Emily stood frozen for a few seconds. She had been to college, enough to know how someone's way of holding a book, taking notes, and reacting to words revealed their level of education. Noah didn't read like a drifter who happened to pick up a book. He read like someone used to letting his mind wander through layers of language. She quietly slipped back into the kitchen, but inside her, small, uneasy ripples had already started to stir, and the odd details kept piling up, almost as if they had been waiting for her to notice. Once, when Noah helped her fix a leaking faucet, Emily watched him work with the kind of ease you only saw in trained professionals. No Googling, no calling for help, just a quick glance, and he knew exactly what to do. "Did you used to be a plumber or something?" she joked, drying her hands with a kitchen towel. Noah laughed. "No, but I did have to rewire the entire electrical system at home when I was a kid." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Home where?" He hesitated for a split second. "An old house, before everything went sideways." There were no specific details, just a vague, evasive answer. Emily nodded, pretending not to care, but inside, her suspicion bubbled up like beer foam rising in a glass. What confused her the most was how Noah handled social situations. One time, when they were shopping at the grocery store, Noah paid in cash. But when the cashier made a mistake on the bill, he calmly pointed it out, with a confidence that showed no trace of awkwardness or hesitation. He was so polite about it that the cashier blushed and rushed to apologize. Since when did someone living on the streets know how to handle things so gracefully? Noah carried himself like someone who was used to an environment where proper manners were second nature, not a learned performance. One night, as the rain pattered lightly against the window, Emily woke up thirsty and heard Noah's voice in the kitchen, talking on the phone. She held her breath and crept closer. "No, I'm not ready to come back. It needs more time. Don't send anyone. I'll reach out when I'm ready." His voice was low, tense, so different from the casual tone he usually carried. Emily stood there for a moment, then quietly went back to bed, her heart pounding. Who was he talking to, and why did he need time before coming back somewhere? The next morning, she casually asked, "Do you have any friends or family in this city?" Noah smiled and shook his head. "It's just me." The answer came too easily, almost like it had been rehearsed. Emily pressed her lips together. She knew she wasn't supposed to dig. Their agreement was only a marriage contract for her grandmother's sake, nothing more. But her instincts told her, Noah wasn't at all the person he was pretending to be. That day, while clearing out an old drawer to make room for Noah, Emily found something strange, a wristwatch tucked away in the pocket of his jacket. It wasn't a cheap flea market kind of watch. She recognized the brand immediately, a luxury label known worldwide. The watch had a sleek black face, polished steel edges, and an elegant design. If she sold it, it would be enough to cover her rent for an entire year. Emily clenched her fists. What kind of homeless man owned something like this, and hid it like he was afraid someone might find out? She carefully put the watch back where she found it, her mind swirling with 1,000 questions. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. What was Noah hiding? Who was he, really? The memories of how he read books, fixed things, handled people so gracefully, spoke on the phone, and the sight of that expensive watch, all of it pieced together into a strange picture she couldn't quite complete. She looked out the window. A fine drizzle fell softly over the old rooftops, like damp puzzle pieces that refused to fit, and she was stuck in the middle of it all, unsure of what to believe. Part of her wanted to let it go. Whatever was going to happen would happen. She and Noah only had a few months of this contract marriage before they would part ways. But another part, the stubborn part, whispered, if he's not really homeless, then what is he? That question clung to Emily all night, threading itself through strange dreams, leaving her feeling like she was standing at a foggy crossroads, unsure which way was real. Emily couldn't take the gnawing restlessness inside her any longer. She decided to dig deeper. Not out of cheap curiosity, but because her instincts were screaming. The life she was stepping into wasn't as simple as she had once thought. That morning, she pretended everything was normal. Made breakfast, grumbled about Noah leaving his stuff everywhere, and turned the TV on loud. Noah didn't suspect a thing. He sat folding his newspaper, sipping his coffee, completely at ease. When Noah stepped out to buy some bread, Emily went straight to the drawer where she had found the watch the other day. This time, she found a stack of papers. Not much, just a few sheets, but enough to make her freeze. A thick, embossed business card. Noah Carter, Carter Holdings Group. Emily almost dropped the whole pile. Carter Holdings was a massive financial conglomerate she had heard about on the news, controlling real estate chains, investment funds, and tech companies. The chairman of that empire was Noah Carter, the sole heir after his parents' sudden death in an accident 5 years ago. No way, she muttered under her breath, her heart pounding wildly. The man she thought was homeless, the man lounging on her sofa, fighting her over the TV remote, bumbling around her kitchen, was actually one of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the city. She barely managed to shove the papers back into the drawer before Noah pushed the door open. "You, who are you?" Emily croaked, her voice raw. Noah froze, and for a brief moment, his eyes were flooded with emotions she couldn't name: regret, exhaustion, and a deep, buried sadness. He set the bag of bread down on the table, pulled off his hat, and moved with a calmness like he was walking into a courtroom. "I figured you'd find out eventually," Noah said quietly. Emily clenched her fists. "You lied to me." Noah shrugged, his smile a mixture of sadness and resignation. "If that's how you see it, then what's the truth?" Emily's voice cut sharp. "What game are you playing here? Another rich man's joke?" The question landed like an invisible blade. Noah stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I wasn't playing games with you, Emily," he said, his voice low and steady. "I left everything behind to run away. The money, the status, they were killing me, a little more every day." She let out a dry, bitter laugh. "And so you decided to become the fake husband of a broke waitress?" Noah's eyes darkened slightly. He hesitated, then said slowly, "At first, I just wanted to be a normal person, even if only in someone's eyes." Emily stared at him, stunned. "That day, under the rain, you gave me a cup of tea without asking who I was, without judging, without looking down on me," he said quietly. "You were just kind, as simple as that. And I realized if there was still a place where I could be just a person, it would be with you." His voice broke softly, not an excuse, but a raw confession. But Emily's heart was a tangled mess. Anger, betrayal, fear of the vast gap between their worlds, and other strange, confusing feelings all crowded inside her chest. "You hate me now, don't you?" Noah asked, his voice rough with emotion. Emily gripped the back of the chair tightly, like she needed to anchor herself to something solid. "I don't know," she whispered. Noah stayed silent, his gaze dropping, and for the first time since she met him, he looked truly vulnerable. "Maybe," Emily said, her voice trembling, "if you had told me the truth from the beginning, maybe I would have said no. Maybe I would have run away, but at least I would have had the right to choose." Emily lifted her head, her eyes red, but her voice steady and clear. "I don't hate you for who you are. I'm angry because you made me part of your escape plan without ever asking if I wanted to be." Noah swallowed hard. He stepped closer, standing right in front of her, speaking in a low voice. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant to hurt you. I was just too desperate to live as myself, even for a little while." The space between them was no more than a single breath. Emily could feel the slight tremble in his hand when he almost reached out to touch her, then pulled back. "I'll leave if you want," he said, his voice raw and broken, like gravel scraping against his throat. "Right now." She looked at him for a long time. In that moment, every memory came rushing back. The laughter in their messy apartment, the silly arguments, the night spent eating cheap pizza under the flickering light. He hadn't entered her life with wealth or grand gestures. He came in with the real things, clumsy kindness, teasing jokes, and a sadness in his eyes that was almost never shown. Emily took a deep breath and closed her eyes. "No," she whispered. "Don't go." Noah snapped his head up, as if he couldn't believe what he heard. Emily opened her eyes and looked straight at him. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know if I can trust you completely. But if there's someone out there who needs a second chance to start over, maybe I need someone like that too." In that moment, Noah smiled. A real smile, the first she had seen since the day they met. A gentle smile, almost heartbreakingly warm. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her softly. No rush, no force, just two people finding each other in the chaos of the world. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. The first weak light of dawn slipped through the heavy gray clouds. Sometimes the truth can shatter everything. But sometimes, when accepted with an honest heart, it can build something even more beautiful than any dream. Emily sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold tea. The tiny apartment was swallowed in silence, the yellow light casting her shadow into a blurred, shapeless figure on the floor. Noah leaned against the opposite wall, arms hanging loosely by his sides, as if the slightest breath from her could make him vanish. The truth was out. The apologies had been spoken, but there was still a distance between them, fragile yet impossibly deep. Emily wasn't angry anymore. What gnawed at her now was a weary kind of doubt. How could she trust someone who had hidden himself from the start? How could she place her faith in a future she couldn't clearly see? "Have you ever thought," she said slowly, "that when someone trusts you, they don't need you to be perfect, they just need you to be honest?" Noah didn't answer right away. He looked at her, his eyes deep and still like a midnight lake. "I know," he said at last. "And I know I already lost that first chance." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, giving herself a few extra seconds to think. She couldn't deny it. The days spent with Noah, despite the clashes and the chaos, had been the first time she felt that a home wasn't just four walls. It was laughter. It was stupid arguments. It was someone making her a cup of tea without asking how she liked it. If she walked away now, she could go back to her old life, solitary, safe, untouched by anyone coming or going. But was that still the life she wanted? Emily set cup down on the table and lifted her head. "You want to prove you're serious," she said, her voice no longer trembling. "Then I'll be serious too." Noah straightened up as if bracing for a verdict. "3 conditions," Emily said, her hand resting on the table, her fingers tapping out a slow rhythm. "First, no more secrets. Anything, good, bad, heartbreaking, or stupid, you tell me." Noah nodded. "Agreed." "Second, don't try to fix your mistakes with money. I don't want a car, a mansion, or some fancy vacation. I want you, your real self, your real heart." Noah took a step closer, his eyes steady. "I promise." Emily narrowed her eyes, studying him carefully before continuing. "And finally," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips, a smile that was part mischief, part challenge. "Every time I get mad, you're not allowed to run. You have to stand there, listen to all of it, and apologize properly. Even when I'm wrong." Noah let out a soft laugh, his voice low and warm, like the sound of a muted guitar in an empty room. "That might be the hardest condition," he teased, then bowed his head slightly, pressing a hand over his heart with mock solemnity. "But, my lady, I vow to stand firm, like a loyal fool." Emily laughed for the first time since the truth had shattered between them. Her laughter was light and clear, cutting through the heavy fog that had lingered over them, sweeping it away like it was nothing at all. She stood up and stepped closer, facing Noah. "Are you sure," she whispered, "that you can handle a hot-headed, stubborn girl who might hit you over the head with a frying pan at any moment?" Noah bent lower, his forehead almost brushing hers, his voice low, every word like a vow. "If it means being with you, I'll gladly wear that frying pan like a crown." Emily narrowed her eyes at him, but the corners of her mouth lifted into a smile. She didn't say anything more. She simply reached out, grabbed the collar of Noah's shirt, and pulled him closer. A brief hug, but one that carried more meaning than 1,000 explanations. Noah held on to her like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. And in each other's arms, they both knew. Trust had been broken, but it wasn't beyond repair. Outside the window, the city shimmered with lights, as if reminding them that life still held so much to love, if only they were brave enough to trust again. And that night, in a worn-down apartment, a poor girl and a boy who had once run from his past made the most courageous decision of their lives, to listen to their hearts. Emily had never imagined she could feel so at peace. She lay on the old sofa, her head resting on Noah's shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart against her ear. The tiny apartment was no longer just a place to shelter from the rain. It had become a real home, filled with laughter, quiet sighs, and arms that held tight on cold nights. Noah held her hand, his thumb slowly tracing small circles over her skin, a tiny gesture, full of patience and quiet care. "Today makes exactly 3 months since you made me sign that marriage paper," Emily said absently, a soft smile playing on her lips. Noah chuckled, leaning down until his forehead rested lightly against hers. "And the best 3 months of my life, if you don't count the times I almost got hit with a flying pan." Emily giggled, nuzzling into the crook of his neck. The truth was, it wasn't some perfect fairy tale. They still fought over petty things. Who did the laundry? Who took out the trash? Why Noah kept hiding snacks in a secret drawer? But underneath all those small squabbles, there was an invisible thread tying them together. A thread woven from trust, from forgiveness, from 100 little moments that couldn't be replaced. Noah no longer hid anything from her. He told Emily everything. The crushing pressure of being an heir, the sleepless nights filled with loneliness, the fear of being used, the haunting belief that no one would ever love him for who he really was. Emily listened. No judgment, no interruptions. She simply held his hand, squeezing it tighter whenever his voice trembled. One night, when he asked, "Why do you still trust me, after everything?" She only smiled and answered softly, because when you had nothing left to lose, you chose honesty. And that was enough. The day they finally held a small celebration, just a few close friends, some neighbors, and Emily's grandmother, the sun broke through after days of rain. Emily wore a simple white dress, her hair loosely tied at the nape of her neck, her face glowing without the need for any fancy makeup. Noah, in a deep blue suit, held her hand the entire time, as if afraid that if he let go, she might disappear. Emily's grandmother, leaning on her cane, sat in the front row, quietly dabbing at her tears with a handkerchief. When Emily walked past her, she grabbed her hand and whispered, "You finally found someone willing to walk through the storms with you." Noah heard her words, and he leaned down, speaking just loud enough for both women to hear. "I'll be by her side, through every good day and every bad one." The look in his eyes, honest, steady, made Emily's grandmother nod in quiet satisfaction. That night, after the party had ended and all the blessings had been spoken, Emily and Noah sat on the balcony, sharing a cup of hot cocoa. "Do you ever regret it?" Emily asked, her eyes gazing far into the twinkling city lights. Noah gave her hand a gentle squeeze, his voice low and unwavering. "If I had to lose everything, the fortune, the name, just to spend my life with you, I'd still choose you." Emily turned to look at him, searching his face. In his eyes she saw no more running, no fear, no walls, only peace, the kind they both had spent so long chasing. She leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't some perfect, rosy dream. It was simply two people, once broken, once lost, choosing to move forward together in the most honest, most courageous way they knew. One love for a lifetime. And that was enough. In every life, sometimes we meet someone right at the moment we are most tired, most unsure. They don't arrive with shining lights or sweet promises. They come with clumsy hands, with moments that make us furious, and then somehow make us laugh again. Emily and Noah's story reminds us, true love doesn't demand perfection. It demands courage. The courage to forgive, to trust, and to build something lasting together, no matter how much the world around us keeps changing. Sometimes the most precious thing you can give someone isn't a grand promise. It's simply the patience to stay, even when every reason to leave would be easier. What about you? Have you ever forgiven someone, not because they deserved it, but because you believed in the good inside them? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If you enjoy touching, honest stories like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and share to stay connected to more journeys of love ahead. Thank you for listening to today's story. See you again in the next love story.